Hi, I'm Ted, and I'm a filmmaker, not a professional GM. Tell me why I decided that my first time being a DM would be to homebrew an entire one-shot by myself. All right, now that we got the hook of the video out of the way, let me just talk like a normal human being. Okay, good boy. I guess he's in the video now. I decided to film this outside for the vibes, and also I have 1 hour till sunset, and I'm letting that be my natural timer to say, stop talking. Maybe you're thinking about DMing for the first time and you've come across this video and you're just looking for someone else's experience starting from nowhere and stumbling their way through this fantastical world. So why don't we start with my experience leading up to this project with D&D. It was one of my friends, Trevor, who asked us, would you guys want to do a campaign over the weekend? And we did that for 3 days straight. And it was so fun. So many like memories and stories were made from just our role play. So I got really obsessed with it right then. And then Perfect Storm, Baldur's Gate 3 comes out. It visualized the rules of the game in a very tangible way. Playing a full party of characters, get to see what different classes do, was much more helpful than any player handbook or reading thing for me. Up comes another boys trip. This is where I'm bringing it home, and I get that itch. I say, would you guys mind if I tried to do a one-shot? And I wanted to stretch my creativity and my imagination, and to do so, I decided to create my story from scratch. You know what would soak up all my time? Is to create my own campaign. And I joke about that, but I really wanted to take ownership over something. I wanted to create something that felt personal to all the guys that I was doing this with. I wanted everyone to feel like this was our story. That brings us into the actual video contents itself, the campaign, right? How did I go about this? I was trying to make a true one-shot, a single session that required one setting. And I just started spitballing ideas, and I started a Google Doc. So this is one of the tools that I use, was I just word vomited. Just any idea that came to mind, I started writing it. Basic ideas. A cool setting, these are cool characters, I don't know. I didn't use half of it, but I just started word vomiting, right? Because then you can pick and choose and you can organize the thing. I wanted more of a puzzle roleplay experience than I wanted like a combat experience. I found myself wanting to do a prison break, but instead of just being a traditional, oh, you've been locked up, you have to break out, I wanted it to be super puzzly. I said, okay, a prison break. How do we make that cooler? How do we have surprise in there? How do we have a setting that makes these guys go, whoa? It'd be sick if this prison was in the sky. The Aetherlock prison is a floating fortress suspended high above the world, built into the heart of a massive airship. I kind of set the scene at the beginning as you're like, it feels like you're underground, but then to have this reveal once you think that you've finally escaped, to feel like I am just now connecting this to Andor. Did I rip off of Andor? The plot is this. Okay, there is a kind of mastermind, just a brain in a jar. Just a dude who's been around for a really long time, but he's so intellectual, and he runs the calculations. He goes around the Sword Coast and he scoops up adventuring parties who have already had success stories. He has this mission that he needs the best of the best for. But to get them, he captures these adventurers, puts them through a set of trials, and sees if they get through a physical challenge, if they get through a mental challenge, if they get through social challenge, then these must be the adventurers who are going to take me all the way. Where it gets hairy is that the adventurers who don't make it die, and there may or may not be a giant mound of bodies at the bottom of the prison, but we won't talk about that. But it's for the greater good, so he says. That's where we're at. He captures the adventurers. They wake up in prison. That's where it begins. Wake up, break out. They have to go through combat encounters. They have to go through puzzle rooms to get to the final bit where Brain in the Jar congratulates them. He will attempt to convince you to join his cause. Okay, that's plot. I'm going to cut so much of that plot. I'm going to cut so much of it because you're probably just wondering, how do you make yours, right? How did I figure out combat? How did I figure out NPCs, the world? Did I railroad people? Did I kind of leave it open? Okay, sun is starting to set. Let's get this done. A big question I had going into planning of everything: how big to make this campaign. I was looking up how many combat encounters. How long does combat take? How long does role play take? How long would a puzzle take? To figure out how big to make this prison. And I found combat normally takes a good long time. It was suggested maybe 2 to 3 combat scenarios. So I had lots of opportunity for combat, but I built in a lot of systems in place to be fluid. If they were gonna have an early combat scenario, I would have in my mind shifted the rooms a bit to let them maybe then do a puzzle and then get to another combat scenario. So they're not just like going from combat to combat to combat. Or maybe characters who were going to be hostile would end up being someone that wouldn't instigate a fight. As for puzzles, this is what lights my brain up. I wanted to create some really good puzzles, but I also wanted to acknowledge resources that might be smarter than I am. Straight up be smarter than I am, right? So let me pull this one up. I only have one D&D book. I don't even have the DM guide. I don't have the player guide. But I did buy this, Traps, Puzzles, and Dungeons, that I used either for reference, or I straight up pulled things out of, or I combined a few to make them interesting. Really full of great stuff, really awesome, and I think it's provided some really cool puzzles for that campaign. What I lacked in resources, aka the player handbook and DM guide, I had in over planning. I wrote down so much information, and I really got to learn my world. I got to learn the characters that are in it, their motivations, because I wanted to reference things minimally when I was actually in the campaign. When I was there with my friends, I wanted to be looking at them. I want to be able to describe it to them. I want to be talking to them. I want it to feel like I'm not reading off a page. Other resources I used, I owe so much to YouTubers that I watched. Jenny D, The Pointy Hat, The Fantasy Forge, The DM Layer, Tales Arcane, so much. Dimension 20, Brennan Lee Mulligan, Critical Role, Matthew Mercer, consuming D&D stories they were creating and what people were enjoying. I read a ton of Reddit posts from other players, what they liked, what they disliked, problems they would often run into, solutions to those problems. I used my Google Doc, I dumped all of my thoughts, and then this was a key tool for me, a website called Miro. I'm a fairly visual learner and organizer, and that allowed me to sticky note, to put in information, to connect things through a thread, like I'm putting a conspiracy theory on the wall, but it helped me organize everything so I knew where everything was. I could zoom in on things. I could import PDF documents of character sheets, of stat blocks. I had everything on there. Miro was a huge tool, and I'll probably use it for every campaign in the future. I planned a bunch. There's only so much you can plan ahead of time, because what's almost more important than the world I create is the world that my friends were going to create. So I had to know who they were. So we had our session 0. I got to hear from them on who their characters were. Of course, I like to know what their abilities are, blah, blah, blah. What matters to me is their backstory. I know that whoever they want to be, if they want to be a druid, if they want to be one with a blood hunter, if they want to be a warlock, whatever, I know that they're going to be using their abilities. They're going to know them, and they're going to use them for creativity, for combat, whatever. I'm not building around that. I'm building around the narrative. So I'm interested in what motivates them, why they're an adventurer, what's quirky about them, what are their wants, their desires, who do they hate? Who are they after? Who are they trying to get revenge on? What are their stories? Because I'll tell you this, in friends' stories, I saw pieces of them, and I saw their life. I saw who they were in their stories, and that was so interesting to me, and I wanted to cherish that. I wanted to move that along and be a part of it, and I wanted them to feel seen. Once I have my bones of my narrative, then everything else revolves around those characters. Let me give you specifics. My friend Trevor was supposed to be bitten and turn into a werewolf, but along his path was bitten by a turtle and is now a were-turtle. Always has the desire to be seen as the alpha male, but cursed to always look like, well, a turtle. So, someone else in the prison is really big alpha werewolf. And immediately when I introduced that character, Trevor hated him. Or I should say Trevor's character hated him. And it provided this antithesis, this character that's like, I want to be that. But also, is that really what I want? And so I created these characters that would interact with ours, that would be antitheses to them, or it would be something that pinpoints their motivation. I hear you on what your character is, and I'm acknowledging that. This is not just like a story, this is your story. And then the big day. We held our session, and it went great. It was so fun. The way that they chose to break out of prison, they ended up egging on the other werewolf, essentially telling him like, he's actually not the alpha male. You couldn't break out if you wanted to. And he's like, yes, I could. Yes, I could. And they rolled high enough. They rolled a nat 20 on convincing him, and he just busted straight out of there. It ended up being like 5.5 hours. So that is a point at which I need to change some things. Those things that costed time was a puzzle room where a cipher puzzle was giving them some trouble. I probably could have introduced a little more guidance, a little more help during that, not to give them the solution, but to just like push it along so that they can get to more interesting things. Up until the last encounter, it was all theater of the mind. And that is one thing I will actually change for the future, is I will keep it all theater of the mind. Because once I introduced maps, it all became about like, how far can I move, and where am I, and can I hit this person? Is that opportunity of attack? The final encounter, if you are new and you are looking up like how I did, how to do combat scenarios, the CR system to figure out, okay, this many players at this level, what should be, who they're fighting, how strong should they be? I did that, and they wiped the floor with the final boss. I even raised his health mid-battle. Does not matter. They destroyed him. So that's something I'm gonna need to reformulate in the future. I also had a bunch of other side characters that weren't controlled by them, and I realized that it just wasn't fun being in control of so many characters. I want it to be, like I said, my friend's story, not my story. Overall, I love this game, and I loved creating a world for my friends that we all got to live in, and we all got to improv and create memories, and we shared that together. We all created a story together. In the end, I don't take ownership over this campaign, this story that happened, because that was the four of us together. That was our story, and that's what makes it so fulfilling to me. And I think it would be for you too. If there's anything that you have questions about or want to know more about, I would honestly love to make videos about any portion of that. Anything that would be helpful for you. Or if you guys would be interested in having the campaign, maybe I can put it in a format that you can run it yourself. That would be super fun. Yeah, let me know. All right, buddy. Ready to go inside? Let's get going. All right, buddy. They've had enough.